If you watch TV, stream, listen to podcasts, or even the radio, it seems pretty much impossible in this day and age to avoid an advertisement or endorsement about food or beverages. We're constantly being bombarded with information about deals, new restaurants, ways to eat healthy, indulgent foods that satisfy your sweet tooths or salty, crunchy cravings. In fact, I'm kind of hungry right now just thinking about it. But it begs the question, how does the average person gauge how to create a balanced diet? Or maybe even build a meal plan that helps to manage a chronic condition? Google? ChatGPT? In case you may have forgotten, there's actually a licensed profession that's designed to help people navigate these issues, and it's a dietitian. In today's episode, we'll be hearing directly from one of Ohio's licensed dietitians to see what you may have been missing from your healthcare. I hope you tune in. You're listening to MedBoard Pulse, a podcast by the State Medical Board of Ohio. I'm your host, Jerica Kent, Chief of Communications. Let's talk Ohio. Hello, listeners. I always love when I get the opportunity to do an episode about one of our license types. There's a lot to learn about the training and education it takes to obtain licensure in Ohio, but also how that particular profession is valuable to Ohio's patient population. So let's start today by talking about what we know about dietitians. Dietitians were first licensed in Ohio in 1986. And shortly after, the Ohio Board of Dietetics was established to regulate the profession. And this continued until 2018, when legislation passed that gave the regulatory authority of dietitians to the medical board. At the time of this recording, we licensed 5,980 dietitians. Dietitians are regulated by the Ohio Administrative Code and the Ohio Revised Code, and their laws and rules are found in Chapter 4759. Although I'll admit, we very rarely see disciplinary proceedings for dietitians. Just like the respiratory care and massage therapy license types, the board has appointed a Dietetics Advisory Council to provide counsel to the board on policies and matters that impact the practice of dietetics. Lucky for me, we have someone on staff who's a dietitian, but also I was able to chat with one of the members of the Advisory Council to get some insight into the profession and its importance in healthcare. I'm going to share a conversation I had with licensed dietitian Carmen Clutter. I promise you'll learn something new. Can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks again for inviting me on. I'm Carmen Clutter. I am a registered and licensed dietitian in Ohio. Currently, I serve as a population health director for an Ohio-based managed Medicaid plan. I have my degree in human nutrition from the Ohio State University and also did my master's of science in clinical nutrition from the Ohio State University as well. Let's see here. So over my career, I've really had the opportunity to work across many different levels of healthcare, from community-based pregnancy programs to a larger health system, even in Ohio State government, where I oversaw some nutrition related services for older adults. And in my current role, I really focus on designing and evaluating population health initiatives to improve outcomes for Ohio Medicaid enrollees. I've actually also served on the Dietetics Advisory Council with the State Medical Board of Ohio since 2018, which I've really, really enjoyed. And I'm just excited to be here today because I think nutrition's one of those areas of healthcare where everybody has an opinion, right, on food and nutrition. And, as a dietitian, my work centers on helping people kind of sort out that evidence-based guidance from trends and myths, and then hopefully using nutrition in like a practical, realistic ways to improve their health or, meet whatever their personal health goals are. I think it really stems from, it's so important because food is something we all deal with day in and day out. Like, it's something we all can relate to. We all need it. And it plays a huge role in our health. And so dietitians in the field of dietetics helps to cut through like the confusion, helps to kind of translate nutrition science into real life guidance, recommendations that people can use. And, that's really important because there's really no shortage of like nutrition advice out there. No matter where you seem to go, someone's always kind of telling you, eat this, don't eat that. But, dietitians are not here to tell you to really restrict your diet. I'm not going to tell you you can never have cake again in your entire
I
life.
wouldn't make it.
We we my if I was working with you, Jerica, my focus would say, tell me about what you like to eat, what your goals are. How can we make sure that nutrition fits into your overall health, your goals, your cultural preferences, and kind of like your day-to-day life? And so dietetics, it's that field that like sits at the intersection of science and health and eating. And then the training dietitians receive are based on like evidence-based standards of care that we can also work to help prevent and manage chronic conditions like diabetes or heart disease. Um, so whether dietitians are working one-on-one with individuals, or maybe kind of like me designing programs at like a population health level, we turn that nutrition science into something practical, that more people can use and digest and lead healthier lives because of it.
Digest, huh? That was a good play on words.
Yes, that was good. I didn't even try to do that. It just worked out that way.
I think even from your background and you talking about, again, the population health aspect, you were in state government, now you work for a managed care plan.
Hmm.
There's such a variety of things that I really hadn't even thought about that you can touch and impact within the field of nutrition and dietetics. If you are working with a one-on-one client or patient, are dietitians then primarily needed for patients with specific conditions like diabetes or renal disease or some other kind of thing like that? Or can you, as a regular person, work with a dietitian?
Yeah, that is such a good question. And actually, I've heard it before. And this sounds weird, but the short answer is no. Like dietitians aren't only for people with medical conditions or chronic conditions that need to be managed through, maybe medication and diet. Um, they're really an important part of the overall healthcare team. And it's because we have training that um, allows us to offer evidence-based guidance for both disease prevention and disease management. So even before perhaps a chronic condition shows its face, we can help people manage just overall healthy eating. So, dietitians absolutely work really closely with people who have conditions like, diabetes, kidney disease, GI issues, but that's just one part of what the profession can do. Dietitians also work with people, to prevent disease, as I've mentioned. Maybe people just want to feel better day to day. Maybe it's supporting a healthy pregnancy, could be working with athletes to really fuel the body well, or working with a client, a patient who just wants to improve overall healthy eating and they don't know where to start. I would say as a dietitian, I want people to turn to nutrition as a powerful tool to staying well, not just turn to it and think they need to solve for it when something's gone wrong. And so a dietitian can kind of work, in that space and even beyond the clinical care environments. You'll see dietitians working on food access and food insecurity, maybe even at a policy level. Or even you'll find a dietitian in your local food pantry. And so they're really, really diverse, and they can focus on a bunch of different things. So it's not just for patients with like special conditions or special needs.
I appreciate you clarifying that. And it's interesting, again, the perspective of it being not something that you run to kind of in the crisis, but the
Hmm.
preventative and like sustaining approach. To be honest, it feels like that flies in the face of what many diet trends and
Yep.
special tricks and hacks are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like, that's one of the biggest things dietitians can help people move away from is like those extremes, like the fad
Hmm.
diets, not having guilt associated with food. We see a lot of like all or nothing, meet your protein goals or you're done for kind of thing. But dietitians can help set those realistic, small, sustainable changes that actually work a lot better in the long run, and it's because you can maintain them. And so the profession's really trained and educated in helping people develop lifelong habits. Yeah, I bring up the protein thing because I think we hear that so much, like protein, protein, protein. But maybe you don't want to overdo it with protein because you shouldn't. And dietitians have the skill set to address that and help you figure out all of the chaos around you, what you're hearing maybe on social media platforms, and hopefully just make food not overwhelming and that you feel more confident in your nutrition choices, and we can help kind of discern nutrition information that's out there and what may be reliable, maybe unreliable.
This is so much good information. We'll be right back after a short break.
Hi, I'm Josie. My daughter turns 5 today. Blow out the candles. I'm also an Ohio State Highway Patrol trooper. When you move over and slow down, you're not only giving me room to work, you're making sure I can get home to celebrate with my daughter.
Roadside workers have lives and families, but when they're on the job, they put it all on the line to protect and serve us. Let's all give them room to work. When you see flashing lights, remember, they're not just roadside workers. Thank you for moving over and slowing down.
You're listening to MedBoard Pulse, a podcast from the State Medical Board of Ohio. Let's get back to our discussion about dietetics. I'm wondering, because you do hear the success stories, and there's some people, even in
Yeah.
my own life, who have had tremendous success with one of these, what I consider extreme and for me, not sustainable kind of
Yes.
diets. But does it really depend on the person's body and kind of their own metabolism or issues? Because it's like, well, it worked for you, and so I want
Yeah.
it to work for me, but then I could be miserable, and then I'm only losing 2 pounds, and I'm not,
Exactly.
getting the muscle that I need to be able to do whatever I need to do.
Yes, absolutely. So nutrition, I think, is completely individualized, from understanding the role it plays in your body to also like your personal preferences. Um, it just varies remarkably. Now, on one hand, if you're on a special diet to manage a chronic condition, some of those can be a little extreme, but dietitians are part of that, that healthcare team that helps support, someone maintaining that nutrition life. If it's other kind of what we call those fad diets, I would say overall, this is a blanket, maybe general statement, but I would never tell someone, no, don't do that. I would try to tell me why you want to explore, the paleo diet. Tell me what your goals are, what you're hoping to get out of it. And sometimes those conversations lead to more information in which, you may recommend a different diet. Maybe it's just they've heard a lot about, low carb eating, but it's that point in time where you can provide some education on, well, your body really does need carbs. Let's talk
Mhm.
about some healthy carbs to incorporate, and how we can cut down on maybe carbs that don't have as much like nutritional bang for the buck kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, and so dietitians can really help in that space. And sometimes it takes a conversation. But I would say absolutely nutrition should be individualized. What works for you may not work for me. What makes me feel good and fueled may not, work for you. So it's completely individualized.
Is the goal to enjoy the food, most of the food that you eat, or is the goal to use food for what it needs to do for you? I've
Yeah,
heard people say, like,
that,
eat to live, eat live to eat kind of thing, but some
yeah.
you saying, like, and I understand what you mean by eating things you enjoy in moderation, the excessive sugar, salty, that kind of stuff, I get
Hmm.
that, but I
Hmm.
think it just made me think, I wonder, because that's hard, if you want everything to be the most delicious thing you've ever eaten, that's
Absolutely.
probably not the goal.
Yes. That's such a tricky one. Like, I think for me, I would say, yes, I want everything. I want overall your eating experience to be enjoyable. Um, but doesn't just mean, eating whatever we want, because at the flip side is like, Are you going to enjoy it that much on the back end if you're led with like, you know how stomach issues and you're not being able to do those other things you love to do,
Right.
moving, maybe physical activity, sleeping better. So it's got to kind of be like that balance, like eat what you love in moderation. Um,
Mm.
and eat mostly plants if you can, kind of thing. So it's all a fine balance. You know, with working with people from like, one extreme of we're not, they're struggling to even figure out how to get one veggie in their day.
Mhm.
It's small changes. So like for that one person, I'm not going to expect that they're now going to be eating a vegetable with every meal and only snacking on salads. But how can we add one more thing in right now, make that part of our lifestyle, and then try again in the near future to improve diet a little bit more?
Mm.
I think that's the biggest thing. Like small changes sustained over time are going to have the biggest impact. And so, I think for some people it's probably maybe, a full flip on what you're eating, but you don't have to do it all at once. It's baby steps. Doesn't have to be perfect to be effective. It's those small changes. And that's actually what research has shown to have a bigger impact long term. Small things you can sustain and you can manage rather than, I'm, making these far-fetched goals and telling yourself, well, on Monday's the day I'm going to turn my diet around. And then, Monday comes and goes. It's not all or nothing. It's small, consistent improvements over time.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think people probably need to understand that even more. I need to understand that more. Let that sink in. What education is needed to be a dietitian? You mentioned specifically what your background was, but
Yeah.
what's required if someone wants to take that route?
Yeah. So here in Ohio, dietitians are required to be licensed by the State Medical Board of Ohio before they can actually practice. Many dietitians are also registered dietitians. So if you see the RD, that means a registered dietitian, and that's a national credential through the Commission on Dietetic Registration. So, while in Ohio, technically, licensed dietitians don't need that RD status. Many dietitians hold both. So for many, you'll see them as an RD, registered dietitian. And in Ohio, you'll also see LD, licensed dietitian. So to become licensed in Ohio, you need to have at least a bachelor's degree. More often, we're seeing more and more with a master's level degree because that's a requirement for the RD credential. At the national perspective. And then after you do that academic coursework, there is a supervised practice component. It's usually around 900 hours of hands-on
Oh,
training. Yeah,
I
it's pretty
see.
extensive. Which is great. It's that real hands-on training, the learning, the working with clients, members, communities, and practicing those skills while you're supervised by another licensed dietitian. And then after you're done with all that fun stuff, then you take a national exam. Once you pass that exam, you can apply for a license through the state medical board, and then you're legally, authorized to practice in Ohio. And then you're kind of maintaining that license over the years and ongoing continuation. Um, Continuing learning credits are a part of that. Maintaining solid ethics as a healthcare professional, all of that. So I think, knowing if you're working with a licensed dietitian would be key. You can feel confident that you're getting guidance for someone who's gone through all of this training, all of this education, and someone who is regulated by the
Mhm.
state to provide like sound nutrition guidance, which is great.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that explanation. I didn't realize, especially like, supervised hours, I didn't realize that was a portion
Hmm.
of that training process. I know we talked a little bit about the settings that, um, again, someone who is studying or trying to become a dietitian are found in. So I'm assuming then the skilled nursing facilities, again, someone who's interested in the clinical setting in the hospital, or you talked about school, those kind of things. Are there different specialties as well within like the track of dietetics?
Yeah, yeah, yep, absolutely. So, we've kind of already talked that dietitians can really be found everywhere. And sometimes I think that surprises people. I think we often think of dietitians in more clinical based settings. I can tell you when I went into dietetics, that was not my jam. Like I love all the clinical dietitians that there are, but I'm more interested in the non-clinical spaces sometimes. So, outside of hospitals and clinics, you'll find dietitians in community health programs. A lot of them are in research, doing private practice, and there's a bunch really invested in working really, really hard in public policy. Um, Around different federal and state level programs. So you'll have dietitians working, at that macro level, shaping programs, policy, while others work at the, micro level. Maybe they're embedded in your community, they're working at the school. So really like anywhere food, health, and people intersect, you might find a dietitian there. And certainly there's many dietitians that choose to specialize. So you'll have dietitians who are focused on oncology, prenatal nutrition, sports, athletics nutrition, like performance-based nutrition, eating disorders. And that list really, really goes on and on. So definitely you'll have some dietitians that choose a select specialty. And then you may have dietitians that are just working in other areas, in other environments. It's really, a diverse field. And I would, if that's interesting to people that are listening in, know that there's so much opportunity for a dietitian to make an impact. And it doesn't just always have to be in the clinical space.
We'll be right back after a short break.
Under Ohio law, all complaints are confidential. Complaints inform the board of any potential problems with a licensee's practice. Anyone can file a complaint, including patients, providers, hospitals, media, and many other sources. The board takes complaints of licensee misconduct seriously as we strive to protect the public and regulate medical providers. To file a complaint, simply visit med.ohio.gov and click the link File a Complaint.
Welcome back to MedBoard Pulse. Let's tune back into our conversation all about dietetics. We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but in a world with influencers and health gurus, and like you said, nutrition information in every corner of the internet, and at the supermarket when you're standing in line,
Yeah.
how can a patient identify a licensed dietitian?
This is like one of my favorite topics. And this comes up all the time, especially with the Dietetics Advisory Council. So, as I mentioned, in Ohio, that title dietitian is protected by law, which
Mhm.
means you have to be licensed to use it. I see a lot people turn to use the term nutritionist.
I've seen
But
that too.
that's like my big caution, at least in the state of Ohio. Some states have different laws, but in the state of Ohio, that title of nutritionist isn't regulated. So
Mm.
anyone could call themselves a nutritionist, regardless of their training, or regardless of their experience or their background. And maybe in some scenarios that training could be really extensive, or a nutritionist could just have taken, a weekend course and have like a really solid social media post about nutrition. But, if you're looking for a licensed dietitian, you're looking for a professional who's been trained in dietetics. You want to look for the credentials, that LD credential, meaning they're licensed here in the state of Ohio. Or if you see the credential RD or RDN, which would stand for registered dietitian or registered dietitian nutritionist, those are like the safeguard measures. Those letters tell you, hey, this person has a good background. They've completed their education. They've done their supervised practice. They've passed the national exam, and they're regulated by the state. feel free to trust them. And they can really help. I would be really cautious about some of our social media influencers, that they certainly do share good information, but a lot of the information they share is based on opinions and personal
Mhm.
experience. And our licensed dietitians are more, they're held accountable to science-backed evidence, ethics, and then state regulation. And
Absolutely.
that
And like we
matters
talked
when
about.
you're making decisions on your health.
Absolutely. And like we talked about, those are kind of generalities for people. We've talked about
Yes,
nutrition. It should be very like personalized and individualized for people. So if you're just one of a million people who saw a post, it's probably
yep,
not,
exactly,
constructed for you.
exactly.
Is there an overarching thought toward GLP-1s from the dietetics community?
Yeah, super important topic. So, I can't speak for like all dietitians, so take this just from the word of Carmen Clutter only.
Mhm.
But my stance is it's a tool. It's a tool that that maybe you or others or whoever, it can be a tool to lean on to achieve health. GLP-1 cannot be the end all be all. You can't just depend on that and not focus on healthy eating, not focus on sleep habits, not focus on physical activity and expect to be healthy long term. So I think for some people, again, this goes back to like very individualized, care. Um, for some people, it works really, really well, cutting down food noise, controlling cravings, but it's not the only thing they're doing. We see
Mhm.
more success when it's just that tool. It's another thing you've added to your tool belt in addition to working on improving your diet, increasing your physical activity, drinking more water, generally moving more and improving sleep habits, like all of that combined is going to help lead to better weight loss and sustainable weight loss.
Mhm.
It absolutely does show that when for a lot of people, when they go off those GLP-1s, they gain the weight back. And a lot of
Mhm.
that's because we haven't formed those healthy habits that can keep us on the track long term. So again, I think, working with your healthcare team to identify if a GLP-1 is right for you. And if it is right for you, it's not your crutch. It's a
Mhm.
tool in your tool belt to getting you to a healthier lifestyle and making sure that we're still prioritizing healthy nutrition habits, moving more, sleeping better, just kind of being healthier overall.
How did you specifically choose dietetics as a profession? You said that when you first got in, you were not interested in the clinical setting,
Yep.
but what
Yeah.
even led you to pursue this?
Yeah. I think, I brought this up a little bit before, but I chose it because again, it's like that intersection of like science and everyday life. So everyone eats, everyone's got questions about food. I have tons of questions about food. Yeah, I think your food journey, your nutrition is so incredibly personal. And so I was really drawn to a profession where I could help people, um, in a practical but like meaningful way. Um, Meet their health goals or improve their health outcomes. I've always been more intrigued into kind of like healthcare and public health overall.
Mm.
And just in my time in the field, have seen how powerful nutrition can be, not just at the individual level, but at more of a population level. So I love the opportunity of connecting with people. Everyone's got a story, a relationship with food, whether it's cultural, maybe it's emotional, maybe it is really tied to their health. And so I've always found that really interesting. And once I, really got into some of my core classes around nutrition, I'm just like fascinated by how the science behind food fuels the body, like how it impacts the health, how small changes, sometimes easy changes can make a really big difference.
Mm.
Um, I'm just like thinking of this quote that I have in my office that says, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And that's always resounded with me. Like, I love the idea of nourishing, healing, and sustaining your health just through like the food that we fuel ourselves with. And so like dietetics to me really felt like that good blend of science, connection, kind of real world impact. And honestly, it continues to feel that way today. And so that's why, I love it now as much as I loved it when I made the decision to jump into the space, years ago.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that because, yeah, food is so powerful in our lives,
Yeah,
whether we like it or not. And they're emotional and, you can say, cultural, all kind of things that we're attached to with it.
absolutely.
You kind of answered this question as well, but what would you say is the very most rewarding thing about your profession?
So for me, I think the most rewarding part of being a dietitian is like watching people feel more confident and less stressed about food. When someone says, like, I get it, I finally feel like I understand what works for me. I understand what to do next with nutrition. That's like huge.
Hmm.
And I think, dietitians don't just focus on like diet changes, right? We want people to feel more in control of their health. Um, and so anytime I can help someone feel more secure in their food choices, that's really incredibly meaningful. Um, Early in my career, that actually looked like connecting people to food resources,
Hmm.
helping them build healthy meals, even when they were relying on a neighborhood food pantry.
Hmm.
It was, teaching someone how to stretch ingredients or introducing them to a produce item at like the free community produce giveaway down the streets. It's like those small moments have become really powerful and are the ones I look back and say, man, I feel like I've made a difference in that person's life. And I'm so grateful they allowed me the opportunity to connect with them in that space.
That's pretty powerful. Is there anything
Yeah.
else you wanted to add about anything, like topic wise?
No, I mean, I think I'm really hoping that people have learned a little bit more about dietetics, and maybe are interested in joining the profession. We're a smaller profession if you look at like the healthcare licensure overall. And so this is a great time to enter the profession, become trained, become a health care nutrition expert in your space because there's so much miscommunication out there that the more more allies we can have that are evidence backed, I think the better the health of our population will be. So this is just my call, my shout, my scream to come be a dietitian today kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Carmen. I really do appreciate you being willing to hop on this call. And I do think people have a lot to learn. And I think you provide a lot of good information, whether for someone who may be interested in this profession or just for people who maybe have been wanting to get some advice and didn't even know where to start, or, I've been overwhelmed with whatever their particular
Hmm.
nutrition needs are. So I very much appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate the invite. This has been great.
In today's market, where there are so many competing voices telling us how to eat and live healthy lives, it's a relief to me to know that there are healthcare professionals who are trained and skillful in helping individual people achieve their goals. I hope you learned something new today. Maybe you'll reach out to a friend in the profession to thank them, or schedule an appointment with a dietitian to help you on your path. The resources are available to you. I'm glad that you know how to access them now. Thank you for listening to this episode of MedBoard Pulse from the State Medical Board. A special thanks to our guest, Carmen Clutter, for giving us an inside look into the world of dietetics and the benefits it can have in our everyday lives. Subscribe today to hear our episodes right away. For more information about the Medical Board, visit med.ohio.gov. You can also email questions or comments to communications@med.ohio.gov. And remember, the more you listen, the more you'll learn, the more you'll share.